New York's up 2-0. We'll get to the refs. So Brunson goes down. New York plays without him for the last 15:32 of the first half. Halftime score, Pacers are up 67-56. Halliburton had a great first half. Obi Toppin, the bench production the Pacers are getting here is incredible, and it has to be obviously very frustrating for this team to be down 2-0. All right, but as we start the second half, Brunson comes back. By the way, it must have been incredible for Brunson to come out onto the court and you're in MSG and he's warming up, getting shots up, seeing how the foot feels. People are going nuts. They're chanting MVP. And we're obviously not seeing any of this. That had to be a surreal moment, not only for that crowd, but also for Brunson, who after the game was like, yeah, that was pretty cool. He was trying almost not to acknowledge it as the crowd went crazy. So the Knicks, off of that energy and Brunson's return, go on a 27-6 run. During that time of that run, then OG Anunoby goes down, and then he misses the last 15-27 of the game, clearly going out at what? It would have been 3:27. So OG, who at times offensively, I've talked about him feeling like, if he has to just freestyle with the ball, I don't know that I'm always going to love it. I think if it's kind of predetermined shots or predetermined drives or off the screen and he knows he's going right away, he gave us kind of everything. And he kept them in this game while Brunson was out. So not only do you have the injury concern now, considering who the Knicks have as options, that was just an incredible OG night that ends in disappointment with him leaving. So we mentioned Halliburton's big first half, not much in the third. Some places had it at one shot attempt. I had it at two. In the fourth, he had 5 shot attempts and some free throws in there. So it wasn't as bad as it felt in real time, where it's like, hey, if this guy's all NBA caliber, and I know we've had a real split based on who Halliburton was after the beginning of the season, the injury, and then coming back. But you're like, okay, but he was really good. And he actually hit 2 huge shots, I thought, late. So I think ultimately all of us are sitting there hoping it's more, but we'll get into some of the stuff that was happening, because it looked like DiVincenzo in the second half just cranked it up another level. And it was so intense, the defense on Halliburton, where it was taking him a little bit longer to get into what he wanted to get into. They had Nembhard bring the ball up, which I don't always love, because I feel like Nembhard, although a nice role player, I've just felt over the course of watching him with the Pacers, the ball ends up he's really confident. And it'll feel like if Halliburton gets stuck, then Nembhard will go. And what I love with teams with really great perimeter players, and we've seen it with Anthony Davis, we see it with Brunson in this series, and even against the Sixers, is, and whenever a team stops you on the first thing that you try to do is that high level score, if you get rid of the ball early enough, you can always get the ball back. And then it's the way basketball works. They're not going to get back to you with the same trap once you get the ball back off of the first thing the defense tries to do. So that's something I'd like to see maybe the Pacers do. It's like, okay, if Halliburton's in trouble, have that release valve there for him, get the ball out of his hands, have him run to the other side, get the ball back. And it's not the same focus defensively from teams. I mean, this has been going on forever. You just notice it. And some people get really frustrated. Some players get really frustrated with giving up the ball and then wondering if they're going to get it back. The best players understand this. The best teammates understand this. But clearly the Pacers realized it. And I think that led to Halliburton looking like he was floating, certainly more in the third quarter. But then he came back in around the 7:10 mark of the fourth quarter. So then you also had a moment there where, with Hartenstein out, you had Hart on Siakam. And that immediately, after a couple of possessions, was like, all right, this is a problem. So then I was kind of wondering, how's it going to work when Turner's back in the game and then Siakam's in there? And considering OG isn't available, that just means more Precious, who I like. But I know he's had his issues kind of finishing around the rim, but it's been better in these 2 games. So all of this happens as we're looking at McConnell get subbed out, which we're definitely going to get to here as well. Siakam, after they had made the change there, he had missed 2 free throws at 4:02. He had a really good look at a 3, missed another step back, and this all happened within 2 minutes. So that was certainly frustrating on the Pacers side of it. So McConnell had done a really great job with his effort against Brunson. We can all see it. I mean, McConnell, I've told the Combine story a million times, watching him at the Chicago Combine years ago, and there was this top international prospect who could not bring the ball up in the scrimmages against TJ, and I think he left the Combine. So we know what we're getting when we see TJ out there. But he never comes back into the game at that 7-10 substitution of the fourth quarter. So it's easy for all of us to say, hey, TJ should be in at some point. We'd like to see him in there defensively. There was a substitution opportunity where the Knicks had to get the ball across because the play had stopped. They hadn't cleared half court. They were going to only have a few seconds to do it, and Hart just immediately got it right up the court. You could argue there, like, hey, maybe just sub him in on that possession and say, just don't let them get across half court because that's how good he is. But clearly, the Pacers don't share our opinion because of the lack of shooting that you have with TJ, and they are about spacing. They're about moving the basketball. And TJ, throughout his career, has been somebody that fills in when you need him to, but you don't expect him to be closing games or closing a game like this. McConnell doesn't shoot threes. Now, you may say, wait, he's 44 and 41% from three his last 2 years, but he's averaging 0.7 3-point attempts per game the last 2 years with those great percentage numbers, and that actually matches his attempts for his career. In 1920, not the year, the season, TJ played in 71 games and shot a total of 17 threes. He doesn't take that. He doesn't want to take that shot. I mean, honestly, TJ, Sam Hausers, Sam Merrills, like our people are trying to make progress here. So it's just not going to happen. And that has to be the other side of it, where they feel like Nembhard is just better as a spacing as a 3-point option, even though defensively we've seen how bad this is when Nembhard ends up on Brunson single coverage, which again, everybody is looking bad against what Brunson is doing. So we'll see if there's a change here. And it could be as simple as Carlisle and the Pacers saying, like, well, let's just try to switch it up. Van Gundy was all over it. There was a lot of criticism. And maybe we'll feel like it was wrong and that all the criticism was justified if they change what they want to do defensively with McConnell, if Brunson continues to do this. But it also could be about New York's offensive rebounding, which is another reason that maybe they're like worried about McConnell and how aggressive these guys are. Look at these numbers going into last night's fourth quarter. So we're looking at 7 games. So the 6 against Philly, game 1 against the Pacers. So these are the numbers prior to last night's fourth quarter, where, again, it happened again. New York's offensive rebounding numbers, 31 total offensive rebounds, their opponents at 15. Second chance points in fourth quarters through those first 7 playoff games, 49 for the Knicks, 15 for their opponents. It's absurd what they're doing. And we told you against Philly, when their offensive rebounding rate was around 40% for the playoffs, it was the highest number. Now it'd have to stay there, but it's the highest number that we've seen in the NBA playoffs in 10 years. So back to Brunson, 24 points in the second half. The Pacers go through a 0 for 5 stretch from the free throw line, which was just abysmal. And I want to take a look at the Pacers' defensive strategy against Brunson. It's 112-110 after a ridiculous Halliburton floater. The Pacers decide, okay, we're trapping Brunson at half court. Like, we're just trapping him. All right, let's get him stuck with the half court line behind him as the third defender. Let's get the ball out of his hands and see what happens. Well, here's what happened. They get it to Hartenstein, and he's kind of the release valve catch, throws it to DiVincenzo for a 3, 115-110. They trap Brunson again, but he gets the ball back. He misses a 3, but guess what? Offensive rebound, Precious, he gets the dunk, 2 points. They trap Brunson again. Hart now just lingers near the trap going, get it to me. And this is this amazing asset in Hart on top of all the offensive rebounding, the 3-point shooting, since his wrist apparently clicked back into place. But with Hart in these spots, and I think a lot of this too is these Nova guys and all these big games that they've played in. And granted, they're at home here, but they're not scared of any of this stuff. And if Hart has to make a decision with the ball in his hands in one of these big moments, you trust that he's going to make the right decision. He swings it to DiVincenzo. He drives, feeds it to Hartenstein, who ends up with free throws. So that trap fails differently. Then they go back to single coverage, right at Nembhard. Guess what? Turnaround jumper. He hits that one. Then there's a bit of a scramble possession, which wouldn't really count because, it's not the same as, hey, this is exactly what the defense wants to do. They trap Brunson again at half court. Hartenstein gets it to DiVincenzo, who hits another 3 where Nesmith is totally to blame on this one. He let himself get way too low. He let himself already be out of position and then be really easily screened to clear DiVincenzo for the 3. It's 124. It's 115. It's game. The Pacers basically tried everything except TJ McConnell. But with the way Brunson's playing right now and the shot making off of it, and Hartenstein totally comfortable making that pass, or Hart being able to dribble off of that trap, and now you're playing 4-on-3. You look at that film, it's a lot like we talked about with Philadelphia in the beginning of that series, where they were playing this like extended 1-3-1 zone and staying on the Brunson side. And then every time they swung it, Josh Hart hit all the threes. So I'm sure they're as frustrated as any Pacers fan, but the Knicks are just dicing it up. So the Pacers filed 49 missed calls from game 2 last night, which is 20 more than the 29 missed calls they filed after game 1. So that's a total of 78, according to Brian Windhorst. I'm sure you are mad if you're a Pacers fan. Game 1, I would be really mad if this was my favorite team and I had posters and made signs when I went to games. The non-kick ball in game 1, the Turner screen foul, which I already covered on Tuesday, those are extremely frustrating, these huge moments. We can talk about like every 2 points is 2 points, but like we know the deal. As the clock continues to expire, the value of those possessions goes up, even if the math tells us that it doesn't. So 78 seems high. I don't know if it's a bit like the legal process where somebody's being charged with something and they just overcharge them like crazy and being like, all right, we'll charge them with 10 things and maybe 8 get dropped, but we're really focused on the 2. It's clearly to send a message. Carlisle gets ejected from the game. It's a very physical game. These games are absurd. And yeah, I don't love the Brunson off-ball flops. He got 2 of them last night. Like, just let them fall. But this was not some free throw game where Brunson, like in game 1, I think he only took 6 free throws, so it wasn't that. The guy just continues to make every single shot. So, where I am on a lot of the ref stuff. My rant about the offensive players initiating the contact is more about the evolution of where the game was going as opposed to nightly stuff. I just think it's a very it's a practice that's susceptible to all sorts of criticism. Because whenever anybody's like, oh, the officiating, it's the NFL and college, or the Pac-12 guys are the worst, and the NBA is awful. It's like whenever I do draft prep, I'm like, you guys think the NBA refs are bad? It is something that exists that I'll always ask, like, when did you like officiating? When did you think it was good? Oh, never? So that's kind of what it is. And when you're down 2-0, but look, don't miss all your free throws. The Pacers defense, which we knew was not good, maybe the worst of any of the remaining teams, they gave up 130 points on 91 possessions. That was an offensive efficiency rate for the Knicks of 147.9, which would be the third highest, which was the third highest of any game the Knicks have played in this season. So, look, I get your frustration. I'm not saying they're not missed calls. I'm not telling you you're wrong to be furious about the end of game 1. 78 missed calls through Pacers tinted glasses, knowing that if I just wanted to do the same exercise and go, let me find 20 calls that went against the Knicks last night, or calls that were called or calls that weren't called, I can probably find them. I'm just not going to spend my time doing that. However, Pacers fans, I think there's still hope. I actually do. Let's look at the minutes part of this. So the Knicks had 3 days off in between game 6 of Philly and game 1 of the Pacers. So part of us could say, well, that's why Tibbs played all these guys that much. It's like, yeah, or it's maybe just what Tibbs does. I think we'd all agree it's the latter. But now there's only 1 day off between the next 3 games. 2 days off between potential game 5 and 6, and then there'd be 1 day off between game 7, and who knows? I mean, it's still a lot to ask considering what Brunson is doing here. Hart just played back-to-back 48-minute playoff games. It's the first time it's happened in 11 years. The last guy to do it, Jimmy Butler in 2013. He actually played 5 48-minute games in a 7-game stretch for the Bulls, and you guessed it, his head coach, Tom Thibodeau. Jimmy was not Jimmy yet. It was only his second year, so his stats weren't – you can't look at those game logs. I was looking at it this morning and be like, oh, does this mean – it's like, well, actually, he wasn't that much of an offensive guy, so you can't go, oh, he played all these minutes, so that means he still was good. I think he had like 15 a game in that series when they were eliminated. But I wonder with the OG injury, we know Mitchell Robinson's now gone, and Bogdanovich, which, when they made the trade at the trade deadline, that was the big headline because it was that boring of a trade deadline. And I remember even saying, like, with knowing Tibbs, I don't even know if Bogdanovich is going to close games for him. And he wasn't with everybody else. He mentioned Alec Burke last night. And Alec Burks, Burke, we've been struggling with that one for decades. Tibbs said, I'm pretty sure he said his name wrong. Which in the heat of the moment, heading into a game, playoffs, like, we're going to give Tibbs a pass on that one. But you're like, this guy can't get 10 minutes. So I wonder if the minutes part of this changes. It has to now if OG, whose day-to-day is of this taping, I wonder if that changes some of the approach now that these next 3 games are so close to each other. And if I'm a Pacers fan, like, are we going to start seeing a different game? You're probably going to get a different whistle at home, but you've been at a free throw disparity advantage because of the style of play and your defense. But that's the thing that I'm thinking about if I'm a Pacers fan or if I'm just on the staff going, okay, this is an incredibly frustrating first 2 games of the series in New York. But if OG can't come back and the minutes start adding up, because I don't think Tibbs, I can look at the strategy and the schedule and say, oh, maybe he knows he has to adjust off of this. I don't think that's really what he does. It's never really what he's done historically. And that's why I think the Pacers still have a chance to get in the series.